The way you talk to yourself does influence your interactions with others, but it also influences your mood, your decisions, your choices, your growth, your energy, your nervous system, your digestive system, in essence, your whole life. And that's what I want to focus on today, bringing your awareness about how your self-talk influences your life.
I don't like to argue, so I say nothing and fume for days.
How do I set boundaries without sounding like a jerk?
I hate the idea that I might accidentally offend somebody, so sometimes I'd just rather say nothing at all.
Welcome to the Language Alchemy Podcast, and thank you for joining me today. This is your host, Alejandra, a transformative communication teacher and coach devoted to helping you have more peace and more harmony in all your relationships. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm so grateful you're here. And if you've been listening for a while, I'm so grateful you've been spending time with me, reflecting on your communication, becoming more aware of some of your communication patterns, or learning transformative communication tools to have more fulfilling relationships and a more equitable world for all. Thank you. In this episode, I want to give you some transformative communication tools to go within and reflect on your communication. Specifically, I am going to help you look at your communication in the most important relationship you have, the relationship with yourself. If you live in the Northern Hemisphere, where I live, we are in the middle of fall. The air feels crisp. The sky in Northern California is spectacular during sunrise and sunset. And right now, as I'm recording this episode, there's a beautiful, soothing rain. Wherever you are in the Northern Hemisphere, you know that it's feeling colder and the days are getting shorter. In fact, we just had daylight savings in the United States and we turned back our clocks. Autumn is a pretty special time of year because the fall season invites us to go within. The fall is a wonderful time for studying and contemplation. That's why I always teach multiple week communication courses in the fall, because the external natural conditions are excellent for learning about ourselves. I often say that I help people transform their relationships through transformative communication. And if you talk to any of the people I've supported about what they've learned with me, I think they will all tell you in their own words something like this. I became aware of how I talk to myself and how the way I talk to myself impacts how I talk to others. Yes, the way you talk to yourself does influence your interactions with others, but it also influences your mood, your decisions, your choices, your growth, your energy, your nervous system, your digestive system, in essence, your whole life. And that's what I want to focus on today, bringing your awareness about how your self-talk influences your life. In my years working with people and their communication, I find that people know a lot about how others talk to them, but they know little about how they talk to themselves. Sometimes people tell me about their inner critic, or they say that they know what they think about themselves. But it's been perhaps, just a handful of people who've come to me because of how they talk to themselves. Usually, it is in the work we do together that they learn to pay attention to their inner dialogue, that is to say, what and how they talk to themselves. To help you raise awareness about your inner dialogue, let's start by answering this question. What's the first thing you say to yourself as soon as you wake up? I'm going to repeat the question to give you space to consider it. What is the first thing you say to yourself as soon as you wake up? I remember working with a communication coaching client, let's call them Casey, who discovered that what they said to themselves every morning was, and I quote, "This is going to be hard." That's what they would say to themselves. This is going to be hard. And can you guess what they would do? They would go back to bed, sleep for a couple of hours, and then they would get up in a rush, skip breakfast, and leave their home as fast as they could because they knew they were running late for work. When Casey got to work, they would usually greet their coworkers with an "I'm sorry I'm late," and start the workday ill-prepared for the tasks at hand. Casey, by the way, did not come to me because of how they talked to themselves. They came to me because they were having arguments with clients, and their supervisor said, "Casey, you need to do something about this because our clients are getting frustrated with us." When Casey found this out about their internal dialogue, Casey understood that it wasn't the clients who were being hard to deal with, or it wasn't that their job was so stressful. No, Casey is a very capable person who can develop workable relationships with all their clients. It was Casey's own internal dialogue, the one that influenced their decision to go back to sleep. And that decision would make their day hard. So saying to themselves, "This is going to be hard," as soon as they woke up, was a self-fulfilling prophecy. I myself have experimented extensively with this, saying different things to myself when I wake up. I've shared about this in my weekly emails, which I send every Wednesday. And by the way, if you don't get my weekly emails, it means you're not on my mailing list and you're missing my personal stories and you're missing reading about how I'm working with my own communication. But no worries, it's very simple to sign up and receive my weekly emails. Just go to the show notes and you'll see a sentence at the bottom that says, "To sign up to my mailing list, click here." So you click there, enter your name, your email, and voila, you'll hear from me every Wednesday. Now, because I know how I want to influence myself when I wake up, I have different supportive expressions I say to myself to set myself up for the day. And if you're wondering if these expressions are common affirmations that you may have seen on Instagram or maybe read on self-help books, they are not. These expressions need to have your own personal meaning. I don't teach my communication students or coaching clients affirmations that someone else came up with. I teach the wonderful people I support to find their own authentic expression because it's their own expression that's going to be much more powerful and beneficial than any affirmation they or I may have read somewhere else or that someone else wrote. And I do this with myself as well. I've connected to what I want to say to myself as I wake up because I know that what I say to myself as soon as I wake up will carry me through the day in a very purposeful way. And that is what I want for my life. I've tested this again and again, and when I sometimes have a difficult moment or a challenging interaction in the middle of the day, that phrase, what I said to myself first when I woke up, shows up in my internal dialogue during that difficult moment or that challenging interaction. And it completely influences how I show up with that difficulty or with that person. So now that you've heard about how useful it can be to be aware of the first thing you say to yourself when you wake up, what about you? What's the first thing you say to yourself when you wake up? And if you don't know, it's okay. It just means it's time to pay attention. So tomorrow, as soon as you wake up, listen to your internal dialogue. The more you listen, the more you'll pay attention to it, the more you will notice how it affects you, how it impacts your choices, how it influences your decisions, how it influences your life. So give it a try and then share it with me. You know, I love talking about communication and what we experience when we communicate consciously. A second way to increase your awareness about your self-talk comes at the opposite time of your day, and that is at the end of the day. As your head hits the pillow before you fall asleep, that is another beautiful opportunity to notice your internal dialogue, especially if you engage in some kind of review of your lived experience of the day, which, by the way, I sincerely hope you do. But I'll talk about this next week in my next episode. So let's go back to this question. As you're winding down and your body is lying in bed and your breath is slowing down, what do you say to yourself? A client I worked with, let's call him Jake, like many of the people I've supported, alternated between having a hard time falling asleep and having a hard time staying asleep. Jake would wake up in the middle of the night and wrestle for hours to get back to sleep. As a result, he was exhausted by the middle of the day. So he would turn to caffeine to keep himself awake, even though he knew that caffeine had more negative side effects than benefits for his particular physiology. But he needed the energy. When we worked on bringing awareness to his internal dialogue, he discovered that the last thing he said to himself when he was in bed was, and I quote, "There's never enough time." And what would follow in his internal dialogue was a list of all the things he, quote unquote, should have done and didn't get done. This list would elicit anxiety and restlessness. So as Jake was going to bed, instead of slowing down and helping his internal dialogue get quieter so that his mind would get ready for rest, he was doing the opposite. He was amplifying his language of action, and in doing so, he was accelerating his mind and giving his body the message that this was time for doing, not for relaxing. As we worked with his internal dialogue, Jake started what we called an internal dialogue ritual, in which he would consciously talk to himself and choose what to say to himself before sleep. Jake was able to influence not only his ability to fall asleep or stay asleep, but he was also able to have more energy and focus during the day and get more things done. He no longer needed caffeine in the middle of the day, and that helped his health tremendously. So once again, how about you? What do you say to yourself as you transition from wakefulness into sleep? And if you don't know, it's not a problem. It just means it's time to pay attention to your internal dialogue at the end of your day. Maybe you keep a little notebook on your nightstand. If you do, what you will find is that you tend to say the same thing to yourself every morning or every night. Or maybe you'll find a variation of the same theme. Once you know what it is that you say to yourself, you get to decide whether you want to keep saying this to yourself or whether there are other messages that you would like to give yourself that would be more supportive, more loving, or more respectful of you. Try these transformative communication tools, and again, if you're on my mailing list, shoot me an email and let me know what you discover. I love hearing from you. Also, I have a favor to ask. The podcast is my gift to you and my way of contributing to as many people as I can. If you find the Language Alchemy podcast helpful, then help me reach out to more people. And you can do this in 2 ways. You can leave a 5-star review on the platform you're using to listen to this podcast right now, or you can share the podcast with your friends and loved ones. All right, let's recap what you've heard in this episode. Today, I invited you to start going within and observing the relationship with yourself by reflecting on your internal dialogue, your self-talk. I shared that the fall is a especially favorable time for doing this. We also talked about 2 ways in which you can start increasing your awareness about your internal dialogue. The first one is by noticing the first thing you say to yourself as soon as you wake up. The second one is by noticing what you say to yourself at the end of your day as you transition into sleep. I hope this episode was useful for you. Thank you so much for listening, and a special thanks to all my students who are participating in the Choosing True Connection course, because they are listening to their internal dialogue with great confidence, clarity, and compassion. As I'm saying this, I'm thinking of 3 of you who are taking this course right now. Thank you, Nami, Denise, and Ilya. Next week, I'm going to teach you about the importance of self-review. Until next week, and as we say in Argentina, ciao ciao. Original music by Gary LaPoe. You can find all links in the show notes at languagealchemy.com.